Today we're here with a critically acclaimed Australian act. This is a band of accomplished, powerful and completely badass women. We've got Lisa Gents, who is an incredible vocalist, and Jules Parker, who is an exceptional guitarist. She's been compared to Jimmy Page. They've got 6 studio albums, and they've got multiple industry awards under their belt, and we're so delighted to be chatting to them today. We're here with Hussy, Hicks. Hey guys.
Hi.
Hey.
Hello. So nice to have you here with us. Would you mind just kind of introducing yourselves and saying a little bit about what you do in the band to start us off?
Sure. My name's Lisa, and I sing and play percussion and a bit of guitar in Hussy, Hicks. And yeah, I grew up playing music from a really young age. I was about 9 years old when I sort of begged my parents for music lessons. And my sister and I started playing concerts in pubs and bars and cafes, you know, from the age, I think I was about 11. And yeah, just never stopped, never really grew up. So I met Jules about 15 years ago. And yeah, and we formed this little band, and we've just been traveling around the world playing songs ever since.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I'm Jules, which you met, and I play guitar and sing and play a bit of percussion and do a bit of the sound making behind the scenes also. And I also grew up, you know, with quite a musical family and started gigging from my young teens, and haven't stopped until, I mean, I guess the last 5 months have been the least that either of us have gigged in our lives.
So I think the next question is, why are you called Hussy Hicks?
Look, honestly, it was a joke years and years ago. We always, you know, Jules and I have always loved the word hussy. I still love the word hussy. You know, the dictionary definition is a brazen or immoral woman. And
brazen and immoral. I think you get to be both.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't know. I've always been a bit of a shy person off stage. So just that whole concept of like being really upfront, I really like. And Jules used to use the term a lot for our group of friends.
Yeah.
You know,
hey, Hussy, what's
a bunch
happening?
of hussies or whatever. Yeah. So this little band name kind of came up as a possible, you know, one day we should put together a bluegrass band and call it Hussy Hicks. And we never did. We just started playing music together, and it was the only band name we'd ever come up with.
Yeah, I booked a tour before we had a name for our actual band. So we went with the name for our side project band that didn't happen. We got stuck with it.
Yeah, 14 years later.
You have one.
So activism and social commentary are an important part of your music. What message are you trying to share, and can you tell us a bit about how you went about that in your latest album?
We probably, we've sort of always been pretty community minded with what we do. We get to meet a lot of different people from different sections of the community, and you get alerted to different things that are happening in different times. You know, we got quite involved with the Bentley blockade in Australia a few years ago, which was
environmental activism. Really became really important to us. Based upon things that were happening locally and within Australia.
Yeah, we've got a really, you know, I guess coming from Australia, and I spent a lot of time in the UK, and I remember having this sort of light bulb moment many years ago and seeing the way that, say, the African model of distributing natural resources versus, say, the Norwegian model, where one leaves the country totally decimated and you know, fighting for the scraps, and the other one is more a distribution of the wealth through education and that type of thing. And I looked at this, as you know, I looked at Europe and the way that Africa had sort of been a sort of a resource battery for the European development, and I looked across and saw Australia and thought, well, we could very easily spend the next half a century being the sort of resource battery wasteland for the development of Asia. And you start seeing the way that our government has been going in the last 15, 20 years, and we really haven't, it doesn't seem that we've been putting things in place that were good for the development of the country.
Yeah, it has been, you know, profit over people. That's definitely been the governmental focus.
Yeah.
With the latest album, for me, I was very disillusioned by a lot of our government policy and by an election result that I wasn't happy with. And I actually got quite depressed for a little while, and the way that I kind of worked through it was by writing songs that felt hopeful, and trying to focus on togetherness and openness. You know, I think a lot of the issues at the moment are really dividing people. You know, it's this sort of divide and conquer mentality, and I really feel like most people just want the same things, and they also want the people around them to be happy too. So while it's sort of a broad kind of idea, unity and togetherness definitely was sort of right at the front of my mind when writing. You know, I mean, Gather Up the People is the title of the album, and it's also, you know, that song definitely kind of presents what I wanted to, which is, you know, I have hope for you. And yeah, a very hopeful sort of message that instead of being torn apart, that as humans we can come together and be something lovely, you know, be something great.
Yeah, as people from the UK, you'd have seen how much people are being herded into their little bias groups and
divisiveness.
Yeah, and be divided, and it's not necessarily for anyone's greater good. It's more playing on fears. Yeah. So hopefully there's less of that. Might be the way out.
For sure, yeah, we need some unity and togetherness right now. That's for sure.
Yeah,
we say from our 5 different boxes.
Yeah. Those themes are obviously like integral to the album, and they're there, but I feel like when I listen to it as well, it doesn't sort of like, it doesn't smack you over the head with it. Like you're quite careful with the way that you want to put that message across, I think. Am I right? And also
both of us definitely try and write in a sort of artistic kind of cryptic kind of way, you know, where it's open for interpretation.
And I think certainty is a bit of an enemy these days. I think posing questions often, or raising questions perhaps, is every bit as powerful as presenting ideas. Because
I think more so, yeah, more so, and I think that goes to show from the fan base that you've got. You know, you've really drawn people in with the questions that you're asking, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. So I think you do it in absolutely the right way. So well done.
Do you guys do you write together, or do you write separately and come together?
Yeah, when we started the band all those years ago, we definitely came together as 2 individual songwriters who would bring a song to the table, and then I guess
work parts,
embellish it and find the strengths. But as the years have passed, we've come more and more to creating music together from the more infant stages of the song. Like Lisa will come with a basic, you know, chorus and a melody, and I'll develop parts around it, and we'll shape them together. And so it's definitely more in especially the last album. Much more. And
the last album, we wrote most of the songs with our rhythm section, Tracy and Ali. So so we tour a lot with a female rhythm section, and they're magnificent and very creative people. So that was really cool. We rented out a friend's studio for a couple of weeks, and just spent days and days in there, just playing through songs and ideas and jamming, and they really played a huge role in bringing the songs to life.
That's cool. Yeah, it's difficult to write with another person. I found.
Yeah.
Cool.
definitely there's always one of us that sort of spearheads the lyrical content.
Yeah,
And
sure.
it might be more the co-writer will come in where you're like, well, I think this section could, here's an idea you've been having through the song, but we could perhaps build a line here that grows from that. So it's more that than us sitting there going, what rhymes with tree?
Yeah.
Someone Google it.
Yeah, I think a lot of our songs really come to life on stage as well. You'll sort of, as you know, you play differently on stage, and
What is that like again?
Playing on a stage.
Yeah.
A stage?
I actually woke up from a nightmare this morning, and we were on a huge stage, and I'd gone out with just my guitar and not taken my pedals. So I was like,
Oh no.
and they were all like in disarray, and I was standing there on this stage going, no, we were supposed to start 2 minutes ago. And this
Horrible.
Classic.
Horrible, but maybe quite nice as well, just to have that experience.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I don't know, actual real life nightmare when I accidentally stabbed Holly in the hand before we went on stage last week.
With a pair of scissors.
With a pair of scissors.
What?
We did the same gig last year, and she dropped a gate on my hand like minutes before the gig. And this year I was like, oh, I feel really good this year. Like, my hands are working, like, great gig. And then 2 seconds before, she handed me this pair of scissors like into my knuckle. Like, I don't even know how it happened.
They teach you at school.
Don't
hold them by the pointy bit.
Just to clarify, she was using them to trim her nails. I was on stage hollering. I was like, guys.
I was like, we're having an incident.
Oh dear.
Anyway, that was a bit off topic.
Yeah, anyway, sorry.
You guys did a festival gig recently, didn't you?
did.
How was that?
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, fantastic.
What was
it was a proper big stage as well, like the full production, big lights,
Nice.
Huge audience, but all spaced out.
Yeah. Was it a nice atmosphere there?
It's beautiful. It's a sort of camping and BYO festival, so everyone was there for the whole weekend, and they basically worked it so that you could either pick a sort of spot for your group and stay in that, unless you couldn't really jump between areas, and then they had the sort of front section with seats, so people could come up right up the front in seats, but they would swap them over after every act and wash down the seat. So it felt really good. There was no dancing, so there was a bit less of that, like, people mashed up against the front bar screaming and yelling, but it was a wonderful, wonderful step back from playing music in lounge rooms.
Yeah,
that's great.
I stepped back. I stepped back into the.
So correct me if I'm wrong.
Can we just pause for 30 seconds because I just need to move. Sure. I need to move my.
Oh, she's off. Why is she moving?
We'll leave this in, obviously. We're going on a journey.
That's exciting.
Where's she taking?
She's taking us on a tour.
Sorry about this, guys.
Not Sunday, she's got up to shoot a Scots person, is she?
No, it's just sort of
Not a bow and arrow.
From the town walls.
There we go.
Hey.
Nope. Oh, she's wearing pajama
she's in a gym jam. Oh, classic.
Trousers on yet.
Someone's wearing pajama bottoms.
Nice.
The perils of Zoom at home.
Yeah.
There we go. Right, where were we? Yeah, I mean, when we played this festival last weekend, it just felt kind of life affirming, to be honest. Probably the same for you guys. Yeah, it was lovely. Really, really good.
Yeah, I think for me, it's really been a strong realization, this whole thing, several things, one being like, this is what we do, and it's not like, oh, isn't it lovely to be able to have a break, we love our jobs, we love our lives. And the other one is I just I have felt quite isolated, not coming into contact with lots of creative people. We might have mentioned this the other day, but we're usually just surrounded by musicians and artists and creatives, and I've definitely missed that, you know, because we've sort of been bouncing our realities of friends and family who live normal lives and have normal jobs. And yeah, it was really nice to spend, you know, a weekend just surrounded by people who understand us, you know.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Have you got any more gigs coming up, or are you sort of going to like feed off that positivity for a while?
No, we're really lucky actually. We've been chosen to do, it's called the Festival of Small Halls.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we know that.
Yeah.
Is it
So
Cynthia? Who does
it's
one of those?
15 shows throughout
Yeah.
regional Queensland.
Mm.
And
Cool.
yeah, that's coming up in the middle of next month. So
That's amazing.
so we actually go on tour, which
Wow.
Yay.
Congrats, that's so awesome.
As a female duo, do you have any experiences in the music scene that relate particularly to being women?
Oh yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, as you guys know, you know, everyone commonly refers to Jules as Australia's best female guitar player, and we constantly have other musician friends going, well, I don't really know what the female has to do with it. You know, if you're a great musician, you're a great musician. But yeah, we've
for example, this weekend, still, you've been playing, you know, they know that's what you've been doing your whole life. And the DI go, you know, the line goes out. And you sort of say, look, guys, the DI is not working. It's like, have you checked your battery? And you're like, yes, I've checked my battery. See how I'm going, like, the cable's not making any noise. Just little things like that. It's like, oh, let me help you. You wouldn't have thought of that, would you? And you, yeah.
I you know, I also think that I think we're talking about it the last time we spoke as well. I think that it is sort of up to us as well to really define our space and own our space on stage. You know, I've definitely over the years gotten much better at communicating with sound techs and stage crew, you know, to let them know that you know, I'm not just a chick singer with a toy guitar. Like, you know, this is my career. I've been doing this for 25 years or something, you know. But yeah, I'm trying to think of one particular incident.
Yeah, they'll probably all come flooding as soon as you babble for 5 minutes and then go, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, succinct. What's a good one?
No pressure.
No pressure, yeah.
Definitely helping. The sort of unhelpful helping you get.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Mansplaining, yeah.
Like, you know, it's like, oh, look, something's going wrong. It's like, oh, well, you know, have you thought of this? You're like, yeah, that was really obvious. If you've heard what I've said, I've sort of described the 10 levels of troubleshooting I've got to, and I'm asking you a specific question. And you're, you know, oh, have you plugged it in?
And then there's that 1 in a million times when you haven't plugged it in and you're sound checking and you're like, I don't know what it is. And you're like, oh no, I'm that guy. I've done that. It's like the worst thing.
Definitely earlier, as we were talking about it before, you know, there was definitely a time, which seems to be getting better, where it was, you know, we've already got a female band on the act. Sorry, on the bill. So sorry, not this year, guys. When, you know, like we said, they don't say they've got a boy band.
Yeah.
But do you feel like it's getting better in Australia?
I feel like it's been better for us, probably because we have we've gotten to a stage where we kind of do have quite a bit of industry respect. You know, Jules has produced a bunch of albums, but she won several awards for Country Album of the Year, and the artist that she produced for one Artist of the Year. So, you know, with all of these things, with how long we've been around and playing, and, you know, all of the years under our belt, I sort of feel like we've managed to get to a stage where we do have a lot of industry respect, and that feels like it's a really great place to be. And also, I think it sort of gives us a bit of a responsibility to sort of nurture the younger women coming up through the industry as well, you know, because yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that they shouldn't have to go through that we did, you know.
Not that we can think of any of them succinctly at the moment.
Yeah. When I was younger, I was signed to a record label at 16 and went through the real industry thing. And yeah, so many times, you know, the older record execs, you know, they would just kind of use you as a handbag. You know, I never had anything bad happen, but it's like, oh, you know, let's sort of search through our roster of young women and invite them to parties and industry events, and, you know, and sort of, you know, just look like you, you know, like you're really, like they had their finger on the pulse because they had, you know, a young singer on their arm. It's just, you know, that sort of weird thing that I hope is a bit less prevalent.
That's creepy.
I wanted to ask you a question that's a bit more historical now. In England and in the Celtic nations, we've got a lot of traditional songs that reference Australia, traditional folk songs. And obviously there was a lot of movement of people from English and Celtic nations to Australia who will have taken their songs and their stories and their music with them. So we wanted to ask how you think the traditional, this Celtic and English traditional music might have shaped the contemporary Australian blues and roots scene, or if you could talk more generally about how the history and culture of Australia has influenced the music scene. Quite a lot to unpack there.
You know, I think very much. I grew up in the country music scene, which had a real focus on bush music, you know, and that's sort of, I guess that's kind of what it became, like all of the, you know, Bound for Botany Bay and all of those sort of tunes that we grew up hearing as kind of traditional songs that kind of ended up being funneled into country music, and then you know, the stories of the people on the land, because it was, you know, it was pretty rough back there in the early days. Like it's a tough country, you know. We have like crazy weather and, you know, floods and fires in the space of weeks, and, you know, drought, and it is a really, really hard country. So a lot of our traditional songs sort of talk about those times and those issues.
There's definitely you can definitely hear the more traditional sort of Celtic influence.
100%.
You know, traditions running through it, but with the, you know, the different stories of Australia. And we found, you know, I wasn't really exposed to much traditional folk music growing up at all, but since we've been lucky enough to, you know, play your Woodfords and Port Fairies and Nannup festivals and these folk scenes, you get a glimpse into the window and you see that there's a strong folk scene in Australia, and that, you know, there's, like we were saying with you, there's songs that everyone knows and stories, and the you know, the amazing, there's a lot of the sort of, you know, poetry that's got a real Australian bush thing that, with or without music, that real traditional.
And it's having a bit of a
renaissance
surge. You know, there's actually a lot of younger contemporary artists writing really great kind of traditional sounding stories, folk stories, yeah, quite a few of our musical friends are in that scene, and it's really lovely to sort of hear those stories told in a traditional way, but you know, by a modern storyteller.
Yeah, I guess the for want of a better term, the Australiana genre nowadays is a mixture of these sort of Americana sensibilities with the Celtic history through the Australian lens.
And instrumentation and stuff. Yeah.
Mm. Cool. You said they're called, what was it, bush music? I've never heard of this.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
Bella.
I'm sorry, I'm so ignorant. Just Googling it to look knowledgeable.
Comes back to like the days of the bush rangers and that part of early Australian history.
Yeah, we call our forests the bush. So people who go and live in the bush, they're not country people. They're usually a bit you know, they've taken an alternate take on life. So they're the type of people who are more, yeah, we had the bushranger culture, and then, you know, a lot of like the, you know, man from Snowy River, what do you call those horse style people? Showing how good I am.
Yeah, this is really good.
I'll defer to the country singer. What do you call those horse sort of people?
Let's clear that up.
Yeah, people in the bush.
Cool.
Can I ask a question about referring back to this connection with the landscape thing? Because obviously last year in our news, we had all the fires on all the headlines all the time, and it did look really scary and frightening. I just wondered if you had an experience or a story to tell us about that time.
It was brutal.
Yeah.
It was every bit as bad as anything that you've heard, and so widespread. You know, so many of our nearest and dearest were so badly affected,
and for so long. Like, we were on tour in August with our friend Marshall, and he was calling home because he's September, my bad, September.
Yeah.
But he was calling home every day because the area he was in was under threat, and his pregnant wife and daughter were there, and they were under threat for September, October, November, and I think it came
December.
I think the fires finally went through their area properly in December after threatening, and you know, he was out fighting off, you know, exploding gum trees with Hessian bags.
Because the heat and the radiation just gets to a point where the trees start exploding.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's not even on fire, but because it's apparently because of the, you know, if they're hollow, it travels through the roots, and they get so much heat that they just explode.
Yeah, I mean, we learned a lot about fires in that time, and everyone had to have a fire plan. It essentially didn't rain for 6 months, you know, and we live in a subtropical rainforest area.
Yeah.
So at the front of our property is rainforest, and it was quite amazing after coming back from tour, looking through the rainforest, which is usually dense and lush, and it was just dry, and you could see, because, you know, a lot of the undergrowth had died off, you could just see all the way through it. And we had one day where Jules was out, and I was doing something, and all of a sudden the sky went orange, and I sort of looked up, and everything was this like deep, dark orange color, and it scared the shit out of me. I was absolutely terrified, because I was just sure that the fire front was going to come through next, because it was just in the mountains, still quite away from us.
I think it got within about, I guess, 4 miles at the closest, but our studio is also, it's surrounded by rainforest, which hadn't had rain, and it's also in a pine forest, so it's, if something goes there, it's just, there's no fighting it, you just run for your life. But,
So scary.
But, you know, we had friends who were right in the middle of the fires. They had the firestorm pass completely over their property, and they had a helicopter just dumping load after load. 3 hours they spent dumping water on their house So the house was saved, but all of the outbuildings, everything was just charred, burnt to a crisp.
Yeah, there was a good few weeks where you'd wake up and you'd people would be like, okay, we know it passed through, and people had, because they'd have to evacuate, and the amount of times we had a friend who's like, we don't know if our house is still there or not.
They couldn't go back in for weeks sometimes.
Yeah, and found out. It was a constant barrage of horrible stories.
It was just horrific, and the amount of wildlife that was just decimated. It's like, and not just the kangaroos and koalas, but the lizards and the birds and the insects. You have to think of the amount of ecology in forests.
Well, where we are right now is a place called Burleigh Heads, which is actually a beach town. So we've got the studio is the one down on the property, but this is the beach area. We had birds you'd never seen before in both spots. We had a singed magpie out the front.
With burnt wings.
Because it was every bit as intense as you'd heard. And down the south coast, like there's still people living in like makeshift shacks, and then the towns that they're often they've been cut off, and their hope for recovery was the summer. It was the tourism coming back, and now they've had to shut down through COVID. We heard a heartwarming.
They can't have the construction workers can't come in to rebuild. It's just awful for the south coast. They've been so badly affected.
But yeah, we could speak for. We could fill 2 hours with stories of individual friends and their fight against fire. We were lucky none of our immediate friends or family lost their entire house.
Home, yeah.
But
a lot of buildings lost, and all of crops and outbuildings and machinery. People who had their shed burnt down and all of their tools just melted.
It's so intense.
I'd like to know how you ended up with that voice.
Years of abuse. Look, I had a really, really wonderful series of singing teachers. Like I said, when I was 9, I begged my parents to get me singing lessons, and I grew up in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales, and it's a really artistic and sort of varied kind of area, and we've got a great university there that does a music course, so there's just a great musical community there. So I ended up being sort of guided by a bunch of really wonderful local singing teachers, and then when I moved to Sydney, I would save up and get lessons with a man named Steve Ostro, who essentially, it was like doing a workout. I would get there and it was physical. We'd be doing I'd be turning and singing and and it was all about breath control and strength, and he would just work me, and after a 45-minute session I would feel like all of the muscles in my body and around my throat, and it would feel like I'd done a workout, but like it was good, like I was strengthening instead of damaging, and that just kind of put me in this headspace of like, oh, it's a muscle, so if you do the right things then you can strengthen it. And I have been surrounded by really encouraging musicians my whole life, who are always like, no, you're great, you can hit that note, or I will do it the key up, or and I've always just sort of gone for it, like it's for me, doing a gig is a really physical thing. I sort of, I'm sweating through my clothes halfway through the first song, and I just, I love it. That's how I love to perform and to make music. So yeah, so a lot of people, I've been surrounded by people who are really, really sensitive about their voices, but I've taken a bit more of a go forth and prosper kind of way to deal with it.
when I've been listening to you, like I just get this feeling I just really want to like belt along with you. Like I'm not a belter, but it makes me want to just properly go for it.
Well, thank you.
So you guys are from you from the Golden Coast? I'll make that up. I'm making
Gold
a lot
Coast.
of things up. Yeah.
Gold Coast, and it's kind of like it's a border town. Gold Coast, Northern Rivers. We're sort of scattered between those sort of spots. Yeah, we're on the Gold Coast now. We'll probably be in the Northern Rivers tomorrow. Now the borders are open. So
What? Tell us something interesting about it. Tell me something I don't know.
A minute ago, you didn't even know what it was called.
I don't even know where it is. Tell me anything.
the furthest easterly point of Australia is in Byron Bay, which is in the Northern Rivers. The Gold Coast is over the Queensland side of the border. It's a World Surfing Reserve. We have amazing surfing beaches along both spots.
I grew up just south of the most easterly point in a little town called Lennox Head, and the whole region, Byron Bay is probably the most famous. It's now home to all of the rich and famous movie stars, and people like Miley Cyrus have houses there.
No way.
So,
have you met Miley Cyrus?
No, not recently.
We met Billy Ray.
We have met. We met her dad.
Really? Oh, so I'm just googling it. That does look quite nice.
Yeah.
What else is interesting? It's our area is
Beautiful.
the remnants of a massive mega volcano, which is called Wollumben, that's the Captain Cook called it Mount Warning. It's traditionally called Wollumben, and it's it was
considered locally. It's considered the birthplace of the Rainbow region.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and you can see there's a caldera all the way up around the edge, and
it's very beautiful.
They call that the scenic rim. So you can drive sort of a couple of hours north and a couple of hours west and a couple of hours, and that was all once this mega volcano. There's a term for it, but I can't remember right now. But we'll call it a mega volcano.
Yeah,
Cool.
and our soil is deep red.
I was just going to ask that
way.
question. What colour is your soil? Honest.
Because we found Vishton told us in Prince Edward Island their soil is also red.
Like that came up in both interviews. Just
That's
crazy.
That's weird.
My mind is blown.
Soil is so interesting.
All in the soil.
We have lots of koalas. There's a lot of koalas in our area traditionally. They're getting forced out by development at the moment. It sort of sucks a lot.
Yeah, but we have lots of wonderful critters. I grew up with platypus in our creek, and we've seen a couple of echidnas on our land, and lots of wallabies and things like that.
So
We
cool.
saw an Australian gecko last night at my parents' house, which is cool. It's a big, chunky, fat gecko. We have the Indonesian geckos.
Oh, and lots of snakes as well.
Lots of snakes.
Loads of snakes. I stepped on a brown snake, Australian eastern brown. So yeah, give that a quick Google because they're nasty.
What would happen if it had bitten you? Do they bite?
Yeah, and I think they're the second most deadly snake in
That's
the world.
scary.
Oh, geez.
If they
yeah,
bite
that's horrible.
You can be lucky because they'll often do a dry bite because they work out they can't eat you because you're too big. So if you're lucky, they do a dry bite and you're fine. If you're unlucky and they inject their poison, you basically have to stay still and hope that you get an ambulance to get you to the hospital, probably to airlift you to Brisbane to hopefully live. But it's really serious. Yeah.
It's bad.
But they don't want to bite you. Like,
Try not to step on them in
Try not
in
to step
future,
on them, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, is just always being on the ball and watching where you put your feet. So, and usually I'm really good at that. But.
Well, we struggle in England when we're with friends, and we go for sort of hikes, not called bushwalks, hikes. We're walking through grass, and they're like, "Oh, frolic this way," and you're like,
We do a lot of frolicking here.
We love to frolic.
Oh,
English book.
You open up through fields, and then usually there's a pub with great cider and
Yeah, not a snake to be seen.
God no.
Not of the animal kind.
Yeah, we won't put our feet where you can't see them. That's something that's a bit of
That's got to be a good philosophy for life, though, right? I mean,
yeah.
Well, we'll do our silly little good everyone wave and say goodbye. So yeah, thanks so much, guys. It's been really good, and we'll see you again really soon.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
And cut.
Get ready. Get ready. Ready to stick it in the basement, baby. Ready to let it go. Ready to send it somewhere so it won't come back no more. I'm ready to put fear aside and open my heart up to the world. When the sun comes up, it's gonna shine its light on us as one people. Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, get ready. We're getting ready.